There is something terrifying happening right now that almost no one is noticing. The Antichrist? He might already be alive today. And according to the Bible, signs will appear. It's not just a guess, nor is it speculation. But these are signs that must happen first, before he finally appears on the scene. And what's even more frightening is that all those signs, we are already seeing them now. It's like the world is being gradually prepared. The systems are already in place. The structures are already built. And all that's missing is one person who will step into the center and take control. In this video, we will look at 4 pieces of evidence from the Bible that show the Antichrist may already be here. And when you see these signs or pieces of evidence, I'm sure you'll never look at the world the same way again. But before we continue, please, this video means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much. Sign number 1, he rises during global chaos. The Antichrist will not appear when the world is peaceful. He will not emerge during times of prosperity and peace. He will appear in the midst of chaos. In Daniel chapter 7, the prophet was shown a strange vision. He saw 4 fierce creatures, which symbolize 4 successive kingdoms in history.
Ang pang-apat, ang pinaka-nakakatakot.
Powerful, destructive, and destroying everything in its path. It crushes the whole world under its feet. From this beast, 10 horns emerged, which, as the Bible explains, represent 10 kings or kingdoms. But after this, a little horn suddenly rose up among them. This little horn is the Antichrist. Notice the sequence. He did not appear first. He was not the center right away. He emerged while power was being divided, while the once strong systems were in chaos. This means he is not a product of order. He is a product of the destruction of order. The same pattern was confirmed by Jesus himself in Matthew 24. When his disciples asked him about his return and the end of the age, he did not start with good news, but with a warning. According to Jesus, the world will hear of rumors, wars, and rumors of wars. Nations will clash, kingdoms will fight against each other. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. And he said a very important line, birth pains do not remain the same. They don't get weaker, they get worse, they get faster, and they're heading toward a climax. This means that the chaos we see is not just ordinary chaos. It's like a climax. It's not just a world with a major event coming. You can also see the same picture in Revelation 6 in the symbol of the 4 horsemen. The first is conquest. The second is the loss of peace. The third is famine and economic collapse. And the last is death. When combined, the message is clear. War, scarcity, fear, and loss of control. And according to Scripture, this is exactly the environment where the Antichrist will rise. Now let's look at the world. Wars are not isolated, they're like interconnected fires. The war in Ukraine shook all of Europe and exposed the weaknesses of alliances. The conflict in Gaza has reignited tensions in the Middle East and drawn the attention of neighboring countries. The tension between China and Taiwan is causing concern throughout the entire Pacific region. As conflicts intensify, countries continue to strengthen their arsenals. The threat of nuclear weapons, which once seemed like a distant memory, is now returning to the conversation. And in the midst of all this, the world is weary, afraid, and searching for solutions. And that is exactly the kind of world the Bible describes. A world ready to accept anyone who claims, I will bring order. In fact, these are not isolated events. When you connect what's happening in the world today, the pattern becomes very clear. This is exactly the kind of tension that Jesus said would happen. Wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Along with war, economic problems are also getting worse. The total global debt has exceeded $300 trillion. Almost every country is being hit by inflation, from food, rent, to daily expenses. Governments are struggling to balance economic growth, stability, and the value of their currency. The systems that have long been trusted are now slowly being questioned. New alliances are being formed. There are currencies whose continued use is being reconsidered. The system hasn't collapsed yet, but the cracks are clearly visible. It's the same situation in politics. People's trust in institutions, the media, and leaders is slowly fading. The division in society is more deeply felt. Anger is more dominant. Confusion, fear, and exhaustion, especially because of the constant noise in the digital world. Many people, especially the younger generation, feel uncertain about the future. There's anxiety, fear, and a sense that the world has no solid foundation. And almost every level of society is affected by this instability. This is exactly the kind of situation that the scriptures say must exist before the Antichrist is revealed. And clearly those conditions are present now. But there is one thing that is very important for believers. Jesus said,
"When you see these things beginning to happen, look up because your redemption draws near."
This means that the same turmoil signaling the rise of the Antichrist is also a sign of the imminent return of Christ. In history, the same thing keeps happening over and over again. When a society has long been living in chaos, it does not stay there forever. People look for answers, seek order, and search for a leader who will provide direction. And when the pressure becomes too much, people become ready to follow anyone, as long as there is a promise of relief. This is where the biblical pattern becomes clear. The Antichrist doesn't need to create chaos. He comes into a world that is already broken and desperate. He rises because the world itself is asking for a leader, someone who can explain the chaos and provide a solution. But the global chaos is just the beginning. What happens next is even more terrifying. It's frightening because according to Scripture, when this man appears, he won't look like a villain. He will look like a hero, and because of that, the whole world will worship him. Sign number 2, he appears as a man of peace. This is the second sign. The Antichrist will not introduce himself as a conqueror, but as a peacemaker. Not as a destroyer, but as a problem solver. And this is the most dangerous part of his deception, because this was stated directly. In Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, it says that he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. In biblical prophecy, 1 week is equivalent to 7 years. This agreement is widely believed to be a peace agreement. It is likely related to Israel and its surrounding enemies. Notice this. The Antichrist will not begin his rule with war. He will begin it with peace. This is one of the most important moments in the prophetic timeline. The signing of the 7-year covenant is the sign of the beginning of the last 7 years before the return of Christ, which is better known as the tribulation. In the first 3.5 years, the Antichrist will appear to be the answer to all the world's problems. A diplomat, a unifier, a leader full of vision and solutions. He will be elevated in the halls of the United Nations. He will be praised by world leaders. He will be hailed by the media as the greatest statesman of the modern era, and the whole world seems to breathe a sigh of relief together. They think that finally there is a leader who can bring lasting peace. But the warning in the scriptures is clear. In 1 Thessalonians 5:3, Paul wrote,
While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly, like labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape.
This peace is temporary. This peace has a plan. It is designed to gain the full trust and loyalty of the masses. And when the Antichrist finally reveals his true nature, the world will already be bound to him. We can also see the same picture in Revelation 6:2. According to what John saw, a white horse came out. Its rider was holding a bow, but notably, he had no arrows. He was given a crown and he went out as a conqueror, determined to conquer. In ancient symbolism, the white horse represents peace and victory. But clearly, this is not Christ. This is fake, a false image of the true Savior. At first, he will not conquer with weapons, not with bullets, not with bombs, but with persuasion, diplomacy, eloquent speech, and an appearance of righteousness. This is exactly what was said in Daniel 8.25, right?
through peace.
That's how he will destroy many. Why will the world accept this man so quickly? Because after a long period of chaos, war, economic collapse, and social division, humanity is already desperate. They are ready to cling to anyone as long as he brings stability, and the Antichrist will come with answers to problems that seem unsolvable. He will appear to be a person capable of bringing peace. In the Middle East, something that almost all modern leaders have failed to achieve. He will propose economic reforms that seem capable of ending inequality and bringing back prosperity. He will unite the fragmented political systems under the idea of global cooperation. He will speak with intelligence, confidence, and moral authority, and the world will believe him. This is the psychological trap. A person who is hurting doesn't ask too many questions anymore. When someone comes along offering comfort, that person is embraced and trusted, and people gradually surrender their own freedom because what they see is salvation from intense suffering, and history proves this. After World War I, Germany was devastated, the economy was ruined, there was no dignity in politics, and society was divided. When Adolf Hitler rose to power, he did not campaign on genocide. He did not promise violence. What he promised was national pride, economic stability, and social order, and millions of Germans, including Christians, supported him. Why? Because he promised to end the chaos. Now think about this. The Antichrist will operate on a global scale, broader, more sophisticated, smarter. He will not rely on nationalism. He will not shout us against them. What he will appeal to is the deepest desires of people. Peace, safety, prosperity, and unity. He will present himself as the answer to division, the cure for conflict, the beginning of a new era of human progress. And for a time, it will work. The world will celebrate him. He will be trusted. He will be relied upon. And when everyone realizes who he really is, it will be too late. But for the believers, the scriptures have a reminder. In 2 Corinthians 11:14, it says that Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. This means the Antichrist will not appear evil. He will appear radiant. He will not use fear to make the world obey him. He will persuade them through admiration. And that is exactly why he will be able to deceive the whole world. But this deception goes deeper than most people think. While the world is busy with the man of peace, something darker is being built behind the scenes. And what's frightening is it's already working now. Sign number 3. The spirit and system are already at work. This is the third sign, and it is also the most important. The spirit of the Antichrist and the system he will use for global control are already active in the world today. This is not something that will only happen in the future. According to the scriptures, it is already happening now. In 2 Thessalonians 2:7, Paul wrote that,
The mystery of lawlessness is already at work.
Notice the words used. Not coming, not just about to begin, already at work. There is still someone holding back now called the restrainer, who is widely believed to be the Holy Spirit working through the church. As long as this restrainer is still there, the lawless system has not yet been fully revealed. But one thing is clear. The system itself is already being built. The foundation is gradually being laid. Legal frameworks, technological capabilities, social conditioning, economic mechanisms, all the things needed for a global system of control are gradually being put together. And when the restrainer is removed, the Antichrist won't even need to create the system. He will just enter a world that's already prepared. This is clearly proven in 1 John 2:18, according to John.
Dear children, this is the last.
And he adds, just as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now there are already many Antichrists. And this is how we will know that the world is already in its last hour. It's important to clarify this. The spirit of the Antichrist is not just one person. It is a spiritual force that works behind humanity's rebellion against the authority of God. Throughout history, this spirit has raised up tyrants, false teachers, and oppressive systems. But according to the scriptures, in the last days, this spirit will ultimately take on human form in a single man, a leader who will lead the final rebellion against God. There is an additional warning in 1 John 4, verse 3. It says there that every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is said to be the spirit of the Antichrist, which according to the warning will come, but it is also clearly stated that even now it is already here in the world. This means the spirit is already here. It is already active, and little by little it is preparing the world for the coming of the person it will use. We can see its effects in the changes in culture, morality, and faith around us. The truth is being redefined. Absolute right and wrong are being pushed aside. Biblical Christianity is being set aside, belittled, and persecuted. The fear of God is being replaced by the worship of one's own desires and human freedom. This is not just a trend. This is not a random cultural shift. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, shaping the minds of the world to accept a leader who will put himself above everything that is called God. But the spirit alone is not enough. The Antichrist needs a system. And this is clearly described in Revelation chapter 13. In verses 16 and 17, John wrote that the beast will force everyone, whether small or great, rich or poor, free or slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And no one can buy or sell unless he has that mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. This is a global economic system that demands complete obedience. Without the mark, there is no access to society, no way to buy food, no way to pay rent, no basic services. Total loyalty or complete exclusion. For almost 2,000 years, this prophecy seemed impossible. How could one person control all the transactions of every person in the world? The answer used to be simple. There was no technology yet, but now there is. In our very own time, the infrastructure for global economic surveillance and control is gradually being built. Digital identities and systems are already being rolled out in many countries. Biometric data is being linked to government services, banks, and jobs. Central bank digital currencies are already being developed by more than 100 countries, giving governments the ability to monitor, control, and even reverse financial transactions in real time. Facial recognition technology has reached a level where it can continuously monitor the entire population. Social credit systems show how obedience is rewarded and non-compliance is punished. Artificial intelligence is now being used to analyze human behavior and enforce compliance on a scale that was unimaginable even 10 years ago. Cashless payment systems are gradually becoming the norm. Physical cash is being made obsolete, and it's ensured that all transactions are recorded and monitored. This isn't a secret. This isn't a conspiracy theory. These are documented policies, publicly available technology, and stated objectives of governments and international organizations. The technology is already here. Legal frameworks are being established, and the public is being prepared to accept this. The only thing missing is a leader who will activate everything. And according to Revelation 13:7, the Antichrist will be given authority over every tribe, every household.
Bawat wika at bawat
This is clearly global dominion. And for the first time in human history, there is technology to make this possible. We are the first generation in all of history where the prophecies in Revelation chapter 13 are now possible because of technology. The infrastructure is ready. The systems are in place. And when this person appears, he won't need to create the mechanisms of control. He will simply take control of them. The technology is already deployed. The systems are already working. But there is one last piece that is more terrifying than all the rest. The world is being shaped to ask for this very system. Sign number 4. The world is being conditioned to accept absolute authority. This is the 4th sign. Society is gradually being trained to surrender personal freedom in exchange for centralized power, in a way that closely resembles ultimate loyalty to the Antichrist. This is not a matter of politics. This is a matter of the human heart and its capacity to worship power. In Revelation chapter 13, verses 3 and 4, The moment is described when the world transfers its loyalty. According to what John saw, the whole world was amazed and followed the beast. They worshiped the dragon because it gave authority to the beast, and they also worshiped the beast and said,
Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against him?
Notice the language. The world was not forced. They did not follow out of fear. They followed out of admiration. It was not compulsory. This is voluntary loyalty born from the belief that this man is the answer to all of humanity's problems. In the book of Revelation, worship is not just a ritual or ceremony. It is total devotion, complete trust, absolute hope. This is the transfer of the highest authority from God to man. The tragedy becomes even clearer in Revelation 13, verse 8. It says there that all who dwell on the earth will worship the beast, everyone whose name is not written in the Lamb's book of life. This means that every person whose hope is not rooted in Christ will give their allegiance to the Antichrist. Not because they were forced, but because they were deceived. They will believe that he is worthy of worship. So the question now is this: is the world being prepared for this kind of surrender? Let's look at what's happening in our culture and in people's minds today. In recent years, we have seen how people in different countries are willing to give up freedoms they never thought of surrendering before in exchange for the promise of safety and security. During times of global crisis, there have been policies and compliance measures implemented that previous generations could never have imagined. And most people complied, not because there was a gun pointed at them, but because they trusted the authorities who said it was necessary. This is not a political analysis. This is an observation about human psychology. When a person is afraid, he looks for something to stop the fear and is willing to give up almost everything to the person or institution that promises to protect him. This is exactly what the Antichrist will exploit on a global scale. He will appear at a time when the world is full of fear and chaos. And when he offers a solution, the world will not question his authority. They will embrace it. We also see today how absolute trust in centralized expertise is becoming normal. Entire populations have gotten used to accepting certain narratives without question, as if human authorities never make mistakes. Disagreement is no longer seen as healthy skepticism, but as a threat. And this is how the cycle closes. Nowadays, questioning the official narrative is quickly labeled as dangerous misinformation. People who ask questions, express doubts, or simply ask for explanations face social and professional punishment. This is no longer a simple debate of ideas. It's about the gradual loss of individual conscience and critical thinking in exchange for blind obedience to authority. The Antichrist no longer needs to force this kind of mindset. This is already being shaped right now. When he arrives, he will introduce himself as the greatest expert, the highest authority, and the only voice that should be believed. And millions will follow him without hesitation because they have become used to surrendering their own discernment. Let's also look at the culture of celebrity worship. This has reached an alarming level where charismatic personalities are elevated like gods. They are given huge platforms. They are defended against any criticism. Their beliefs are imitated and their way of life is held up as a model. This is the exact same psychological mechanism that will lead to the worship of the Antichrist. He will be charismatic, intelligent, appear moral, and will be admired by everyone. And the world, accustomed to worshiping people, will transfer that worship to him without realizing what is truly happening. Furthermore, moral relativism has already destroyed the concept of absolute truth in the minds of billions of people. If truth is only what I want to believe, I have no defense against a leader who will redefine truth for me. The Antichrist doesn't need to prove that he is right. He just needs to convince the world that there is really no right or wrong. And when truth is just something people talk about, loyalty becomes inevitable. This is clearly explained in 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 9 to 12. According to what Paul wrote, The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with the way Satan works. There will be signs and wonders that serve the lie. People will be destroyed because they refuse to love the truth. And because of that, God allowed a strong delusion so that they would believe the lie. It's important to remember this. People are not deceived against their will. They are deceived because they rejected the truth when it was still available. They did not love the truth. What they loved was comfort, security, and their own power. And when the Antichrist offers all of those, they will worship him because he gives them what they've wanted for a long time. The mark of the beast will not be imposed immediately through force. It will be presented as necessary, as the only way to participate in society, and people will accept it willingly because at that point, they have already surrendered their conscience and freedom to the system. The mark will be an outward symbol of an inner allegiance that has long been given. So when we put it all together, the Antichrist will rise through global influence. He will make a covenant in the Middle East. He will control the digital economic system, and he will have power in the midst of global chaos. Now ask yourself, how many people alive today fit this description? How many global leaders have the platform, influence, and access to the systems we've talked about? Not many. In fact, if you understand biblical prophecy and observe current events, it's surprising how few possible candidates there are. And according to those in the know, there are at least 3 individuals in the last 5 years who have made statements that closely resemble the warnings in Daniel and Revelation. I'm not going to mention any names, but this is what I'm telling you. Watch closely. Because when this man appears before the world, he won't say that he is the Antichrist. He will introduce himself as the Savior of humanity, and billions will believe in him. So where are we now? The world is in chaos, shaping the conditions for the rise of a global leader. That leader will appear to be someone who has the answers and can bring peace, and the world will celebrate him. The spirit and system behind him are already active. The infrastructure for total control is being built, and humanity is being psychologically conditioned to worship centralized authority and surrender their own discernment. This is not speculation. This is a visible reality that exactly matches biblical prophecy. Now, if these 4 signs are already present, what does this mean for us today? There is a strong possibility that we are living in the last generation before these prophecies are completely fulfilled. This is not sensationalism. This is not fear-mongering. This is a careful and serious conclusion based on the convergence of the signs that Jesus himself said we should watch for. In Matthew 24, Jesus shared the parable of the fig tree. When its branch becomes tender and starts putting out leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, Jesus said, when you see all these things, you will know that it is near, right at the door. We do not know the day or the hour, but the command is clear. Recognize the season, and the signs can no longer be denied. War, famine, earthquakes, deception, persecution, and the gospel being proclaimed to all nations. All of these are happening simultaneously on a scale that no previous generation has ever witnessed. For now, the restrainer is still present, holding back the full revelation of the man of lawlessness. But it's clear in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that this restraint is only temporary. When the restrainer is removed, the Antichrist will be revealed. The system is ready. The conditions are set. We are closer to the end than ever before. For those who have not yet come to know Jesus Christ, this is an urgent warning. You are living in a world that is actively being prepared for the greatest deception in human history. The Antichrist will offer everything that the human heart desires, apart from God. Peace, security, prosperity, unity, and purpose. If you don't have a foundation in biblical truth, the deception will be unstoppable, and the price is eternity. In Revelation chapter 14, there is a clear warning. Whoever worships the beast and receives his mark will face the wrath of God. There is no second chance after receiving the mark. The decision you make will determine your eternity. The only defense is a relationship with Jesus Christ that is established now before the crisis comes. In different parts of the Muslim world, a quiet but profound change is happening. This is not a rejection of culture, and it's not a matter of losing identity either. Instead, this is their bigger problem. Many Muslims are already turning away from their religion. In Iran, Tunisia, Egypt, and even in Saudi Arabia, the influence of religion on people's lives is gradually decreasing. Before, the clerics had almost absolute power. Now many people no longer listen to them. Before, the government used religion to control society. Now you can feel that control weakening, and you can see this in the data. In Tunisia, almost half of the youth say they are no longer religious. In Iran, only 1 out of every 3 say they still follow the version of Islam enforced by the government. Online, the change is even more apparent. On Reddit alone, more than 400,000 ex-Muslims openly share stories about how they left the faith. In fact, this isn't a loud rebellion. There are no gunfights here and no coups either. But it's spreading quickly, quiet, digital, and viral. And behind all of this, there's a hard truth. When religion is used as an instrument of power, people lose their trust in religion. And little by little, they start to drift away. Now let's break down how one of the fastest changes in modern times begins. Let's go inside the very faith that once united almost 2 billion people. Let's begin. If you look at it on paper, it seems like almost no one leaves Islam. According to Pew Research, Muslims have a 99% retention rate worldwide. For example, in Indonesia, the largest Muslim country, 93% were raised as Muslims, and 93% still say they are Muslims to this day. The same pattern can be seen in Pakistan, Egypt, and many countries in the Middle East. Less than 1% say they have left the religion. At first glance, the faith seems solid. It seems unstoppable. But there's a problem with these numbers. They don't measure what people truly believe. They only measure how people live. In many places in the Muslim world, leaving Islam is not simply a personal decision. Instead, it can be a crime. In Algeria, Malaysia, Brunei, and Egypt, there are laws that punish apostasy or leaving the religion. In Afghanistan and Iran, open atheism can result in imprisonment or death. In Saudi Arabia, spreading atheist ideas is considered terrorism. In Pakistan, if you post something on Facebook that seems to question Islam, you can be charged with blasphemy. That's why when there's a survey asking about religion, of course you'll give the answer that won't put you in danger, just like what one ex-Muslim said. According to a former Muslim, the first rule of leaving Islam is not to tell anyone that you left. But if you look at places where people are free to speak, a different story comes out. In the United States, around 23% of people who were raised as Muslims have left the religion. That's almost 1 in every 4. In Canada and Europe, there's a similar pattern. When Muslims live in places where they won't be punished for leaving, many of them choose to leave Islam. But the most surprising data comes from within the Islamic world itself. In 2020, an anonymous survey covering 50,000 Iranians produced unusual results. According to this, only 32% said they were still Muslim, and more than 22% said they no longer had a religion. And more than half, more than 50% admitted that they used to be religious but have lost their faith. Therefore, the Islamic religion is really weakening. Despite this, the results of the survey are even more surprising. Almost 60% of the respondents said that they no longer pray, and a large part of their population is also against combining religion and education. Think about that. We're talking about Iran, an Islamic republic whose constitution already states that their country is ruled by God. But even so, half of the population seems to be left out of the system. There was an Iranian analyst who said it directly. According to him, we are 98% Muslim, except when the conversation is private. So it means they're Muslim when someone is watching, and they're not Muslim when no one is watching. Even so, it's not just Iran experiencing this kind of change. In Tunisia, 46% of people under 30 say they are no longer religious. In just a decade, that number has almost tripled. Across the entire Arab world, there's an even clearer pattern. According to the Arab Barometer, in 2013, only 8% of Arabs said they were not religious. By 2019, this rose to 18%. In Morocco, Algeria, and Libya, especially among the youth, it has reached as high as 20%. This is no longer a small group. These are not isolated cases. We're talking about millions of people. For example, if even just 5% of Egypt's population of 119 million quietly turned away from religion, that's almost 6 million. A population as big as a small country, still present in society, but no longer truly believing. So the question is, what broke? The answer is simple. When religion becomes the government, belief is no longer personal. In Iran, you can see this clearly. In 1979, Iran became the first modern country to be ruled by a Shiiteocracy. The clerics are not just spiritual leaders, they are also the political rulers. Islamic law is the law of the land. There are morality police patrolling the streets to monitor people's clothing and behavior. For more than 45 years, the regime tried to build the perfect Islamic society through control. But the opposite happened. The children and grandchildren of the revolution grew up in this system. They did not experience Islam as a guide for morality. They experienced it as a state ideology that controls almost every part of life. They see the mullahs and officials preaching sacrifice while they themselves live in privilege and corruption. They see that any criticism of the system is silenced, supposedly in the name of defending the faith. Over time, the very idea of an Islamic government has become negative in the eyes of many. An Iranian woman said this during the 2022 protest. According to an Iranian woman, they destroyed our religion when they forced it on us. The mandatory hijab law became a symbol. For many, it is a symbol of oppression. The more the regime forces obedience, the more people distance themselves until anger finally explodes. In 2022, Mahsa Amini, a young woman, died after being arrested by the morality police for allegedly wearing her hijab incorrectly. Widespread protests followed across the country. A slogan echoed in the streets: "Woman, life, freedom." People burned pictures of the supreme leader. Some women removed their headscarves and threw them into the fire. This was not a rejection of God. This was a rejection of religious leadership that uses faith as a weapon of power. When people realize that religion and those who claim to be its defenders are different, another question immediately follows. If those who claim to guard Islam are corrupt and deceitful, and if living under so-called Islamic laws is based on lies and only brings hardship, maybe it's no longer worth following the religion itself. In Iran, there's a bitter joke going around. According to a saying there, we asked Allah for an Islamic republic. He gave it to us, and by giving it to us, we were cured of being Muslim. Iran isn't the only one with this kind of situation. In Saudi Arabia, for many decades, the princes and elites enforced strict Wahhabi morality on the public. Cinemas were banned. Men and women were separated in many places. Women's clothing was strictly monitored. But while this is what they show inside the country, some of the same elites live a luxurious playboy lifestyle abroad. This did not go unnoticed by the people. They see the double standards. An even more extreme example can be seen in Afghanistan under the Taliban. Since they returned to power in 2021, they have once again imposed an ultra-strict version. Women have been banned from pursuing higher education. They have been banned from working in most jobs. Beards have been made mandatory for men. Attendance at prayers is strictly monitored. While this is happening, the economy has collapsed and hunger has spread. Those who can escape are leaving. Those who cannot leave are quietly resisting. There are underground schools. There are secret viewings of banned entertainment. There are quiet forms of resistance that are not seen in the news. And when the Taliban eventually falls, because history shows that no regime lasts forever, it will leave behind a generation that will be even less likely to trust a religion that has been turned into politics. But there is something different about this change compared to previous religious collapses in history. Most people can't leave openly, so they do something else. They live a double life. In public, they're Muslim. In private, they no longer believe. On the Reddit forum r/ex-Muslim, more than 100,000 members share their stories anonymously. It started with just a few people, but now it has grown into a global support network. They share their daily inner struggles. They fast during Ramadan when their family is watching, but secretly eat. They attend Friday prayers so no one will notice, but they don't feel anything anymore. They use Islamic greetings and join family celebrations, but inside they no longer believe in what they're saying. There was a user from Egypt who wrote, "According to an Egyptian user, I've been pretending for 6 years. My parents have no idea. If they find out, they'll disown me, or maybe even worse." Another user from Pakistan said, "According to a Pakistani user, every day I feel like I'm suffocating. I have no one to talk to. I can't handle the sadness anymore." This has a huge effect on a person's mind and emotions, anxiety, depression, and the constant fear of being exposed. When you think about how big this silent departure is, the potential number is shocking. If even just 10% of the population in large countries quietly left the faith, that's 1,010 million people. 1,010 million living in a lie. 1,010 million still saying the words, but their hearts are no longer there. In Egypt alone, if that's 10%, it would reach 12 million people. In Pakistan, it would be 26 million. In Indonesia, almost 29 million. These are not just numbers. There are real people behind them. People who are torn between their true beliefs and what they need to do to live safely. For many, the internet becomes the only way out. Imagine a young man living in a conservative town. It's late at night. His family is already asleep. He quietly types on Google, "I don't believe in Islam anymore. What do I do?" 10 years ago, maybe only a few answers would come up. Now it's like the floodgates of information have opened. There are YouTube channels by former Muslims discussing the contradictions in the Quran. There are vlogs sharing stories about why they left. There are online forums saying, "Don't be afraid, you're not alone." There was an ex-Muslim organizer who explained, according to one organizer, when ex-Muslims are discussed, it's impossible not to talk about the internet too. When I left Islam, I thought I was the only one in the world. When I saw others online, I realized people talk about it every day. I was surprised. I wasn't alone after all. The internet shattered that feeling of being trapped. It took away the monopoly of the clerics on information. A 16-year-old in Karachi can secretly watch evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins explain evolution on YouTube. When his parents were 16, the only person they could ask was the imam, and most of the time it was immediately dismissed. A 20-year-old woman in Riyadh can find online what feminist critics say about Islamic law. Her grandmother just accepted it as God's command. The old narrative gradually cracked. Of course, the regimes know this, and they see it as a threat. Iran tried to create a national internet to control the information of its citizens. In Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, there are cyber police searching for atheist bloggers. In Bangladesh, some secular bloggers were killed on the streets after being tracked down. But it's hard to stop the flow. VPN, proxy servers, mirror sites. Tech-savvy youth can find ways faster than the government can impose bans. And this is the problem with systems that are imposed. They think they're winning because people still follow the outward rituals. But the truth is, what they're creating is emptiness. Because when enough people stop believing, the collapse doesn't look like a rebellion. It just looks like silence. And the first thing lost in an empty society is its future. And that future lies in the youth. And among them, there's one group leading the way in leaving: the women. For many women in conservative Muslim societies, religion is not something they experience as a spiritual guide. They experience it as a prison. One ex-Muslim woman said, "All my life I was told there were things I wasn't allowed to do, but my male cousins were allowed to do them. I felt it was so unfair and suffocating. Dress modestly, obey male authority, accept a smaller inheritance, endure polygamy or unequal rights in divorce, bear the so-called family honor. For a young girl with dreams beyond what her surroundings allow, it slowly turns into anger inside." When she questions these rules, the answer she gets is, this is God's law. And eventually, it's not just the law she questions anymore. She also questions God. For many, education becomes the turning point. Many ex-Muslim women say that the change started in university. There, they learned about feminism, human rights, and societies where women are treated more equally. They discovered that there are countries where this exists, where women are not second-class citizens, and nothing bad happens because of it. One woman described that moment. According to her, it was like I had been blindfolded my whole life. Then suddenly, someone took it off. Suddenly, I saw the world in a different light. But leaving comes with a heavy price. In patriarchal cultures, women are expected to be the bearers of tradition and the family's honor. When she turns her back on Islam, it's seen as an unforgivable betrayal. Some families disown their daughters. Others keep them locked up at home. Some are subjected to what is called re-education. In extreme cases, there is honor-based violence. A woman from a religious family said, "According to her, I try to give small hints, like saying, 'I'm not sure about this verse,' to see their reaction. But their response was very negative. I knew I had to hide my true feelings for many years. That's why many of them live double lives for a long time. On the outside, they're active in religion. On the inside, they're slowly drifting away. But when the time comes that some of them have their own money, their own place, and can make their own decisions, some choose to tell the truth." In Iran, the simple act of removing the hijab in public has become a symbol of resistance. For some, removing the hijab in public is not just a simple act. It's like literally casting off the control that has shaped their lives for so long. For many women who have left Islam, the moment they regain the right to make decisions about their own bodies is a tremendous freedom. An ex-Muslim woman from Saudi Arabia who now lives in the West said it felt like a heavy burden was suddenly lifted. "I can feel the wind in my hair again without feeling guilty. I am now in control of my body and the direction of my life." There are now organizations that help women going through this process, such as Faithless Hijabi. They provide support to women who experience trauma after leaving their religion. They convey an important message to women. Don't think that there's something wrong with you. You experience control, and you are brave because you want to change your life. A woman wrote this. According to her, I just realized now that I never really made any decisions for myself. It was always the decision of my parents, my culture, or my religion. Leaving Islam was the first decision that was truly mine. That's when I learned to take control of my life. The difference now is that it's not just one person leaving anymore. Sometimes it's a whole group of friends. Sometimes it's an entire university group. There are young girls who meet in secret WhatsApp groups. That's where they express their doubts. That's where they ask questions together. That's where they help each other. What used to be a very isolating experience is slowly becoming a quiet movement. And when you look at the demographics, this has big implications. They will be the mothers of the next generation. They will pass on their beliefs. Or they may choose not to join the system that demands so much from them. But it's not just women who are walking away. An entire generation, both men and women, are slowly reaching the same conclusion. The system that was promised to them has failed. You can see this in the data. In the MENA region, youth unemployment is the highest in the world. It's at 26%. That's almost double the global average. In Tunisia and Jordan, around 40 to 42% of young people are unemployed. Many of them have college degrees, but there is no clear future for the youth. As for the future, there are young men hanging out in cafes, staring at their cell phones, at closed shops, at opportunities that never come. There are women living every day under rules that are said to give dignity, but in practice they bring control, families struggling, prices of goods rising. It's hard to find a house. Wages aren't increasing, the system isn't working. And because that system has long been wrapped in religious authority, its failure becomes the failure of religion in the eyes of many. This creates a serious question in the minds of the youth. They are told Islam will give direction. Islam will give the answer. Islam will provide livelihood. But they finish their degree. There's no job. They see their father working 3 jobs. But it's still not enough. They see that there are times when their sister doesn't get opportunities just because of her gender. The promises are gradually losing their substance. A young Tunisian said it directly. According to him, they told us that Islam is the solution. We tried it. It didn't work. Now what? That question, now what? It's what troubles an entire generation. In Iran alone, it's estimated that around 150,000 to 180,000 educated professionals leave every year. This is one of the highest brain drain rates in the world. The survey also shows that about 40 to 50% of Iranian students and professionals want to leave permanently. In North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, more than half of the youth have considered moving to another country. They vote with their feet. If they can't change the system, they'll leave. But it's not just an economic crisis, it's also a moral one. The youth see the elite clerics living in mansions while preaching sacrifice. They see officials accumulating wealth, privilege, and luxury. While preaching modesty and discipline to the public, the hypocrisy is suffocating. When leaders preach about honesty and sacrifice during Friday prayer, some people just roll their eyes. They've already seen the corruption scandals, the nepotism, and that's how they reach their conclusion. If the people who claim to be God's representatives don't follow their own rules, why should we follow them? Trust in religious leaders has collapsed. In Iraq, public trust in them dropped from 64% in 2013 to 40% by 2019. In Sudan, it was almost cut in half, from around 50% to 24% in the same period. In Egypt, there was even an experiment in Islamist governance when Mohammed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood won in 2012. But within just a year, people returned to the streets to protest against the government's lack of capability. Some who once wanted Islamic rule were the very ones who asked the military to remove it. That became a lesson for many. It is wrong to mix religion with politics. After this, ISIS came. The group declared that they were restoring the pure caliphate, like in the 7th century. But what the world saw was violence, slavery, and destruction. The almost universal disgust of Muslims toward ISIS cast a shadow even on more moderate Islamist movements. Now, whenever there is a political movement that uses the banner of Islam, many people immediately become cautious. In a survey, half of young Arabs agreed with the statement that religious values are hindering the progress of the Arab world. Read it again, half. This doesn't mean that everyone suddenly became atheists. But it's clear that they are becoming open to questioning whether the excessive dominance of religion in public life is part of the problem. They have already seen enough failed experiments. They have seen countries that have been destroyed, and many of them no longer believe that the Islamists have the answer. This means that when the youth stop believing, the country itself begins to crack. And you can already see those cracks in many places. In Iraq and Lebanon, politics has long been tied to religious identity. There's a power-sharing system based on sect and religion. The result has been corruption that's almost impossible to hide, a paralyzed government. While the leaders of religious factions enrich themselves, the infrastructure gradually deteriorates, and the situation is serious. In 2019, Iraqi youth took to the streets, including those from devout Shia communities. They criticized not only the politicians, but also the religious patrons who supported that system. In Lebanon, there was a chant that echoed in the protests. All of them means all of them. This means they no longer wanted the entire political class, from warlords to clerics. The failure of the state became completely tied to the religious system that formed it. Because of that, many people lost interest in the idea of religion in government. In Egypt and Pakistan, corruption and authoritarian rule have long been widespread. Islam is often used as a way to legitimize the power of those in authority. But when promises fail, when Islamic parties fall short, when dictators who claim to protect Islamic values are caught in scandals, the credibility of the religion itself is shattered. The rhetoric becomes empty. Another clear example is Turkey. For 2 decades, President Erdogan has tried to shape a pious generation. He added more Islamic schools. He reinforced religious classes. He tried to Islamize education. But the result was the opposite. Turkish youth are less religious compared to their parents. According to a poll in 2019, fewer young people regularly pray or fast during Ramadan than 10 years earlier. Some teachers say that more students are now opposing compulsory religion classes. There are even some who openly say they are deists or atheists during classroom discussions. The state tried to impose faith, and the response of many was intellectual rebellion. This is the pattern that keeps appearing in the Muslim world. The more the government or fundamentalist movements force Islamic conformity, the more it increases the backlash and disillusionment. It's like a cycle with no exit. Pressure creates resentment. Resentment leads to silent departure. Silent departure becomes the reason for even tighter control, and every attempt to regain power is proof that it is slowly slipping away. The West often views the Muslim world through the wrong lens. They think the conversation is about terrorism versus reform, or authoritarianism versus democracy. But the deeper problem is the collapse of legitimacy within these societies themselves, where obedience becomes empty, where identity becomes just a show, where the state becomes fragile because it stands on a foundation of forced beliefs. The system that was presented as perfect and unshakable is now giving in to its own pressure. And this is where the most dangerous question comes in. What happens when millions are pretending? That's why the system can survive on doubt. It can also survive rebellion, but it can't survive a future where millions don't believe. Yet they keep on pretending. It's not a loud collapse, it's a crumbling from within, a quiet city at night, neon lights still on, streets that are almost empty, and the echoing call to prayer, but it seems to disappear into the air. The system demanded loyalty. What it created was emptiness. You can't bring back the knowledge. You can't kill the internet anymore. You can't scare an entire generation just to force them to truly believe. And the demographics are clear in many parts of the Muslim world. The median age is in the 20s. This generation grew up in a globalized world after September 11th. They saw the contradictions in their own lives. When the rulers and clerics say, just keep going, stay in the faith, many of them quietly respond inwardly. Why? You haven't given us anything but slogans and hardship. The great irony is, they tried to protect the faith through force, and with that same force, they destroyed it. Millions don't leave noisily. They leave quietly. And that quiet departure is what is slowly changing the Muslim world from within. It's not a collapse due to conquest, but because of a quiet turning away from a system that claims to have divine authority. Radical Islam claims that its goal is to save their faith. But if you look at what happened from Syria to Somalia, from Iraq to Libya, the result is actually the opposite. In Syria, more than 13 million people have been forced to leave their homes. Many of them fled because of the bombings and fighting carried out by both Sunni and Shia militias. Their enemies were not foreigners, but fellow Muslims. In northern Nigeria, Boko Haram burned down hundreds of mosques. They said those were corrupted. In Yemen, Houthi fighters are now bombing Sunni towns. They said it was carried out. Meanwhile, on the other side, Saudi Arabia also dropped bombs in retaliation. Across the Muslim world, there is a clear change. This is no longer Muslims against non-Muslims. This is now Muslims against Muslims. And it's important to clarify this. This is not a Western narrative. This is a civil war. Religious, political, and generational, happening within Islam itself. And if the radical movements continue to win, there's a possibility that none of the faithful people they claim to defend will be left. So this is the question that needs to be answered. How and why is this happening? But before we start, don't forget to like this video. This means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much, and now let's get started. In fact, wherever radical Islam spreads, the pattern is always the same. Cities turn to ashes. The economy collapses, communities are divided, and the faith that should bring hope becomes something that people fear. This is not an accident. Look at the geography. From West Africa to Central Asia, from the Arabian Peninsula to the Sahel, every region that was taken over by radical movements went through the same trajectory. First, a promise of order, then brutal enforcement, followed by the collapse of society, and finally, widespread chaos. In fact, there's a mechanism at work here. This is their trap. Things seem orderly at first, but everything suddenly changes once the extremist seizes power. And once everything seems fine, that's when the cycle begins. Syria is clear evidence of this. Before 2011, it was a middle-income country with functioning infrastructure and regional trade. Now, more than 90% of Syrians are living in poverty. More than half of the country's infrastructure has been destroyed. Cities like Aleppo, which were once vibrant commercial centers, have become graveyards of collapsed buildings. And 13 million people, almost half of the population, have been displaced or killed in the war. According to the World Bank, Syria's economy has collapsed by more than 50%. This is no longer a recession. It's a civilizational collapse. Yemen is even worse. Hundreds of thousands have died in the war. It's a conflict between Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shia Iran. Meanwhile, the Yemeni Muslims are caught in the middle. Millions are starving. Cities that once functioned have become territories of militias, where clean water is almost impossible to find. And in Afghanistan, within just 1 year after the Taliban takeover, the economy collapsed by about 20 to 30%. It took 3 decades to build this up. Schools, hospitals, infrastructure was wiped out in just 12 months. There are families who are even selling their own children just to survive. And almost all the professionals who could rebuild the country have already fled or are still fleeing. This is the revival of radical Islam in real life. So many have died, and the damage to the economy is massive. The real damage is actually much deeper, and it strikes at the very roots of Islam for the very people who follow it. When faith becomes associated with fear, violence, and destruction, people's connection to it gradually gets severed. So that means there are almost no people left who trust Islam. And to understand why it seems like a suicide spiral is happening, we need to see the trap at the center of all this. There are some Muslims who don't want to accept other beliefs. That's why when there's a lack of understanding, that's where the trouble starts. In theory, the dream of Islam is really clear. a global community of believers. They call this the Ummah. It means one faith in God beyond race, nation, and culture. That is the dream. But in reality, radical Islamists are destroying that dream the very moment they insist that only their interpretation is correct. Because when a group declares that they alone hold the truth in religion, all other Muslims become their potential enemies. This means that for them, only they are right. This isn't a new idea. It has happened before, and the result was a disaster. In the 7th century, just about a generation after the Prophet Muhammad passed away, a group called the Kharijites emerged, the first extremist movement in the history of Islam. The Kharijites believed that they were the only true believers. Everyone else was outside their faith. Even Caliph Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, was considered by them as an apostate and deserving of death. The Kharijites turned the Muslim community against itself. They killed fellow Muslims just because of doctrine. They killed Ali. They declared that any Muslim who sinned was no longer a Muslim. They created an ideology. They were so strict, so closed-minded that neighbors became executioners. Throughout many trials, Islamic scholars repeatedly warned against the Kharijites. They are considered the greatest threat within Islam itself. But that warning was forgotten or ignored. Because today's jihadist movements are neo-Kharijites with modern weapons. And they are ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Boko Haram. They have different names but follow the same script. Each one claims that they are the ones reviving true Islam. Each one labels Muslims who do not agree with them as infidels or people who do not accept the faith. And each one of these neo-Kharijites repeats the Kharijite playbook: declare themselves as pure, declare everyone else as corrupt, erase them because of corruption. This is what's called takfir, declaring that a fellow Muslim is no longer a Muslim. And this is the bomb at the center of all the tragedies that will follow. Once you convince yourself that your fellow Muslim is no longer truly a Muslim, there are no limits to what you can do to them in the name of God. The prohibition against killing a believer is gone. The command for mercy and restraint no longer matters. In the mind of an extremist, you are not killing a Muslim, you are simply carrying out a sentence on an apostate. This is a trap with no way out. The more the radical movement tries to enforce their version of faith, the more Muslims they push out. Every village they conquer must be cleansed of impure practices. Every mosque that doesn't fit their design will be demolished. Every imam who refuses to comply will be considered a traitor to the faith. In Afghanistan, the Taliban persecuted the Shia Hazaras and Sufis, considering them deviants. Some Hazara neighborhoods were bombed. There were mosques that were attacked while people were praying. In Iraq and Syria, ISIS carried out a genocidal war against the Shia. Mosques were bombed during Friday prayers. Entire villages were massacred. In 2014, ISIS massacred more than 1,700 Shia Air Force cadets at Camp Speicher. They were lined up, shot, and even filmed. This is the real face of radical Islam in power. And here we see how an ideology that claims to save the faith ends up killing its own believers. This is the trap in the middle, that once a society falls into it, destruction is no longer an accident, but an inevitable result. In Pakistan, thousands have been killed by hardline Sunni militias in attacks on Shia mosques and religious processions. It wasn't just warriors who were targeted. Shia doctors, teachers, and lawyers were assassinated. Everything was justified. One word: heretics. And the violence doesn't end there. It's not just Sunni against Shia that's happening. Radical groups are also splintering their own ranks. In Nigeria, Boko Haram killed mainstream Sunni imams and attacked Sufi shrines. They say that Islamic mysticism is idolatry. In Somalia, Al-Shabaab labeled local Muslim leaders as infidels just because they refused to obey. Even the extremists themselves turned on each other and splintered. ISIS and Al-Qaeda fought each other. Each one declared the other as deviant. There are Taliban factions fighting each other, and there are always new offshoots, more extreme than the previous ones, convinced that the previous generation sold out. This is the product of this trap. The list of enemies keeps getting longer. First, the unbelievers. Next, the rival sects. Then, those in your own group who are not holy enough. And in the end, even former allies. No society can survive this kind of endless inquisition. But what's even more dangerous is what comes next. Because this isn't just a debate about theology. This trap creates real harm in the real world. Harm that shapes entire generations. And the human cost is shocking. Let's start with the youth, the generation that should carry Islam into the future. In Mosul, after years of ISIS rule, a resident said in his words, "I have trauma from religion." He watched execution videos where militants cited the Quran while burning hostages alive. He saw jihadis use Islamic verses to justify beheading children. He couldn't reconcile his faith with the violence he witnessed. So he left. He turned his back on Islam completely. And he is not alone. In Iraq and Syria, surveys show an increasing number of young people questioning or completely leaving their faith. In traditional and conservative societies, this was almost unthinkable before. But after living under radical rule, many associated religiosity with fear and nightmares. According to Arab barometer surveys across the Middle East, religious observance among the youth is declining, trust in clerical leadership is dropping, and opposition to the mixing of religion and politics is growing stronger. Many young Arabs are saying, if this is what an Islamic state looks like, we don't want to be a part of it. But for those who stayed, the nightmare is different, a stolen future. Afghanistan is a clear example of self-destruction. After the Taliban returned in 2021, professionals, doctors, engineers, teachers, professors, and government administrators all left at the same time. They are the people who could have rebuilt the country, and now they're gone. By 2024, more than 3.6 million Afghans have left since the Taliban takeover. Kabul University has almost no faculty left. Hospitals are lacking surgeons. The ministries are not functioning because the bureaucrats have fled. And the Taliban, who banned women from universities and work, who dismissed female doctors and teachers, are now complaining that they have lost human capital. They are struggling to run basic services because they themselves drove away knowledge. The irony is almost laughable. If only it wasn't condemning an entire generation. And Syria? The scale is even worse. More than 7 million refugees have fled the country. Another 7.4 million are internally displaced. That's more than half of the population before the war. And these are not just statistics. These are real people, real loss. And as time goes by, the effects keep piling up. The engineer who was supposed to design Aleppo's water system, he's in Germany. The teacher who was supposed to teach thousands of children in Homs, she's in Turkey. The surgeon who was supposed to train a new generation of Syrian doctors, he's in the Gulf. The entrepreneur who was supposed to create jobs in Damascus, he's in Europe. In Iraq, the entire educated class was gone during the years of ISIS. In Yemen, professionals are scattered across different countries. In Libya, the intellectuals fled. In Somalia, the diaspora is made up of almost everyone who has the ability to get the country running again. The best and brightest in the Muslim world are leaving the ruins left by radical Islam. And with every departure, the chances of recovery grow even slimmer. But what about the children left behind in those ruins? In northeast Nigeria, Boko Haram waged a systematic war against education. They didn't just destroy schools, they erased them from the map. An estimated 1,400 schools were destroyed. Not just damaged, but burned to ashes. They killed 2,300 teachers. Many of them were killed right in front of their students to send a message. The very name of the group means Western education is forbidden. And every year, They made sure that no child would receive an education in the areas they controlled. The amount of lost opportunity is staggering. More than half of all schools in Borno State, the center of the insurgency, remains closed, even though the worst violence has long subsided. Millions of children have lost valuable years of education. An entire generation is growing up unable to read, write, or do basic mathematics. They have no skills to build a future. They have no foundation to rebuild their community. According to UNICEF, 3 million children in this region need emergency education support. 3 million young minds who should be in the classroom, but instead they are growing up in camps among ruins or on the streets. Some are being recruited as child soldiers. Others are indoctrinated into extremism from a very young age. In their memories, the same thing happened in Afghanistan. Under the Taliban, secondary schools and universities for girls were closed. Female teachers were removed from their jobs. Science curricula were restricted. Education became pure religious indoctrination. It focused on obedience, not on critical thinking. Women who were formerly university professors are now forbidden from entering their own classrooms. Women studying to become doctors are now confined inside their homes. This is the long-term effect of radical rule. It's not just destroyed cities, but their future has also been stolen. When you destroy education, it's not just one generation that's affected. You're condemning many. Because the children who can't study today won't be able to teach their own children tomorrow. And that's how the problem keeps repeating, ignorance repeating over and over, a cycle that doesn't break on its own. This is followed by the complete collapse of the economy. In Syria, the economy has shrunk by more than half since the war began. By 2024, around 70% of Syrians are living below the poverty line, in a country where just a decade ago most families were middle class. Cities that were once centers of business have become devastated places. Aleppo, once the industrial heartland of Syria, saw its ancient souks burned and its factories bombed into ruins. Raqqa, the de facto capital of ISIS, has turned to ashes. No industry remains, no production. The Syrian pound is almost worthless. Basic goods have become luxuries. Electricity is available only for a few hours a day, if at all. Clean water is scarce. The healthcare system has collapsed. Hospitals were bombed, doctors fled, and there is no medicine. The country that was once almost self-sufficient in food now relies on humanitarian aid to avoid mass starvation. In Afghanistan, the economy collapsed rapidly and violently after the Taliban takeover. The GDP dropped by about 20% in just 1 year. From receiving billions in development aid, the country became an international outcast because of sanctions. The banking system almost came to a halt. People couldn't access their own savings. Money was almost worthless. Government salaries weren't being paid. And the human cost of economic collapse is felt in everyday life. This isn't just poverty on paper. People are selling their belongings just to buy food. Children are being taken out of school to work or beg. There are families who have to choose who gets to eat and who goes hungry. In Afghanistan, there are documented cases of families being sold. Young daughters are being married off early just to buy bread. Literally, girls are turned into child brides for a little money so the family can survive. In northeast Nigeria, the United Nations estimated that the Boko Haram insurgency has caused nearly 350,000 deaths as of 2020, and most of those who died were not killed by bullets or bombs. They were children, the most vulnerable, who starved or died from disease in the midst of a humanitarian catastrophe. Malnutrition, diarrhea, measles, preventable deaths that happened because the economy and medical system collapsed. If the conflict continues in its current direction, the United Nations has warned that more than 1 million more could die from indirect causes. By 2030, not because of violence, but because of poverty and lack of health care. This is what happens when radical Islam wins. The economy is not just slowing down, not just going into recession, It's exploding from within. Trade networks are falling apart, investments disappear in an instant, infrastructure collapses, and it can no longer be rebuilt. This is the price of an ideology that promised order, but what it left behind was complete chaos. When supply chains collapse, it's the ordinary people who get caught in the middle. They are forced to choose between two nightmares: to go hungry or to flee, to watch their own children die, or to leave their homeland forever. But perhaps the most bitter consequence of all is the sectarian massacres that have stained the entire Muslim world with blood. Because the majority of terrorism victims are not Westerners. They are Muslims killing fellow Muslims, supposedly in the name of God. In Pakistan, thousands have been killed by sectarian violence in the past 2 decades. Sunni extremist groups, often linked to Al-Qaeda or the Pakistani Taliban, systematically bomb Shia mosques during Friday prayers. They attack Shia funeral and religious processions. Worshippers are killed in the middle of ceremonies, in the middle of prayers, in the middle of mourning. This is not a war. This is extermination disguised as piety. Doctors, lawyers, and teachers are targeted and assassinated just because they are Shia. Entire communities live in fear, and everything is justified by declaring an entire branch of Islam as heretical. In Iraq, in the mid-2000s, Baghdad became a sectarian battlefield. Neighborhoods were cleansed along sectarian lines. Sunni militias drove out the Shia. Shia militias drove out the Sunni. Every morning there were bodies on the streets, left behind after nighttime executions. Families who had lived next to each other for generations suddenly became mortal enemies, just because of which branch of Islam they followed. By 2014, when ISIS declared its caliphate, hundreds of thousands had died in sectarian warfare. The civil war, even before ISIS, had long shattered Iraqi society along religious lines. That's why it became easier for extremists to exploit the cracks. And ISIS brought sectarian violence to an even worse level. They didn't just fight against Shia militias, they killed Shia civilians on an industrial scale. The Camp Spiker massacre in 2014 saw ISIS kill around 1,700 Shia Iraqi Air Force cadets. They were separated from the Sunni soldiers, lined up, shot, mass graves, filmed executions, celebration of genocide. In Yemen, the civil war has become a proxy battle between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Sunni versus Shia, carried out through airstrikes, artillery, and starvation sieges. Yemeni Muslims are being bombed by fellow Yemeni Muslims. Weddings were hit, markets were destroyed, villages were leveled, all in the name of sectarian supremacy. The Houthis are bombing Sunni towns. Saudi airstrikes hit Shia areas. At this point, it seems like no one cares anymore. Both sides are killing Muslims, Arabs, Yemenis. The sectarian narrative has consumed everything else. The Ummah, the dream of a united Muslim community beyond all divisions, lies shattered on the streets of Baghdad, Sana'a, Karachi, and dozens of other cities. Communities that lived together for centuries are now separated by fear and anger. Trust between sects has been completely erased. Suspicion is passed down to children as inherited hatred. The very fabric of Islamic civilization is being torn from within. And here is the cruelest part. This is not random. There is a pattern to this destruction. And next we will see how that cycle keeps repeating itself. Every place that is taken over by extremism. It's a self-perpetuating machine, a machine that keeps turning over and over again. The ideas of Kuseri Utak Nadir. But Macon said that these are valuable to countries that have experienced war or corruption. The Taliban emerged from the post-Soviet collapse of Afghanistan. ISIS exploded out of the ruins of post-invasion Iraq and war-torn Syria. Once they are in power, they enforce their own version of order, a harsh theocracy, morality police on every corner, public executions as a warning, women hidden and silenced, art and music banned, and any deviation from their doctrine punished with violence. Such oppression creates resistance. Sometimes it comes from within, as local communities stand up. Sometimes it comes from outside, as governments and militaries intervene. Often it's both. And the result is civil war. More destruction, deeper trauma, more refugees. In the midst of that chaos, a new generation grows up surrounded by violence. Orphaned, displaced, humiliated, hopeless. Some end up in the only mosque that's open, and there they hear the same hateful ideology that caused the disaster. Others vow revenge, and the jihadist recruiters are ready to give them a purpose. From the ashes, new extremists rise. Often, they are even more radical than those before them. Al-Qaeda was born from the wreckage of the Soviet-Afghan War. ISIS emerged from the remnants of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Along with the chaos of the Syrian civil war, when the ISIS caliphate fell, the fighters regrouped in the deserts and mountains. And until now, they are still carrying out attacks. In Afghanistan, the Taliban were driven underground in 2001. For 20 years, they recruited from villages destroyed by war until they became strong enough to retake the country in 2021. Now, ISIS Khorasan, an even more extreme group, is bombing mosques and markets in Afghanistan. They are trying to bring down the Taliban because they say they're too soft. The cycle continues. Every generation of radical Islam plants the seeds for the next. And here is the saddest truth of the cycle. Every failure is blamed on a lack of purity. Extremists look at the ruins and do not see the result of their own arrogance. Instead, they see it as proof that they are not extreme enough. So they become even stricter. They double down even more. Somalia has been trapped in this cycle for decades. Syria and Iraq are following the same path. Afghanistan seems locked in this cycle. And Yemen shows no signs of breaking free. But there might be a way out. Because people are getting tired. Those who have experienced this cycle, those who have lived through repeated devastation are reaching their breaking point. Those who have experienced this, those who have experienced devastation, and those who have experienced devastation. And then the turning point came when the cruelty of Al-Qaeda began to destroy the very society they came from. The tribes turned against them. In the Anbar province of Iraq, the Sunni tribes helped drive them out in an event known as the Sunni Awakening. It wasn't because people suddenly became brave, but because they could no longer endure the violence that was destroying their own community. In Syria, there were civilians who secretly celebrated when ISIS was defeated, even though they were afraid of the Assad regime, because one thing was clear to them. Life under the caliphate was hell. And even in Afghanistan, where the Taliban is now in power, whispers of disappointment are growing. Many Afghans are asking themselves, is this really the Islamic ideal that we want? The incompetence, the oppression, the collapse of the economy. The extremists promised paradise. What they gave were ruins. Across the Muslim world, people are fighting back. There are scholars who say that the greatest threat to Islam is internal, not external. There are activists who promote education that combines faith and modern knowledge. There are voices that repeatedly emphasize the true values of Islam: justice, compassion, and reason. What should guide Muslim societies are these values, not the twisted zeal of the armed groups. Their struggle is not easy. It's an uphill battle, but they carry something important: the recognition that this suicide spiral must be stopped. Because the pattern is very clear and it's deadly. No civilization can survive if it is always at war with itself. If a house is divided against itself, it will fall. The golden age of Islam, when Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba led the world in science, philosophy, and art, happened because faith at that time was driving civilization. It was a source of unity and progress. Today, in the minds of many young Muslims and observers around the world, the word Islam brings images of masked, armed men, ruins, and sectarian hatred. The extremists who claim to be saving Islam are the ones who hijacked its story and dragged it down. That is the answer to our question. How does the effort to save Islam end up in its destruction? By declaring war against everyone who worships differently? By turning faith into fear? By destroying the schools, the economy, and the communities that make up civilization? By creating trauma that radicalizes the next generation? And in the end, by creating a self-perpetuating machine of collapse? Every time radical Islam wins, Islam itself loses. Not because of Western armies, not because of an external enemy, but because of the poison that comes from within. The greatest threat to Islam today is not the forces outside the gates, but the movements that claim to defend it with guns and bombs. So what will happen if this cycle continues? If extremists continue to declare victory while everything around them collapses? We already know the answer. Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, Somalia, countries that ended up as failed states, generations condemned to poverty and violence, a faith that once inspired, a great civilization that is now becoming synonymous with collapse. The question now is this: can Muslims themselves, the reformers, the communities tired of war, and the youth who reject extremism break this pattern before there is nothing left to save? What do you think? Is this unavoidable now, or can it still be stopped?